Okay, I want you to picture this. It's the summer of 1914. You've got an entire generation of young men marching off to war. But they're not scared. No, they're cheering, they're celebrating. They were so confident, holding on to this one single promise that was about to be so wrong. The promise? That they'd all be home by Christmas.
So how on earth did everyone, and I mean everyone, from the top generals to the guys on the trains, get it so completely wrong? That's the huge question we're going to dig into. And the answer, well, it starts with a powerful collective delusion.
You know, it's kind of hard for us to wrap our heads around now, but back in 1914, the idea of a long, drawn-out war just wasn't even a possibility in their minds. The consensus across all of Europe and every single country was that this thing would be fast, it'd be decisive, and it'd be over in a flash. It was this massive illusion, and pretty much everybody bought into it.
So why were they so sure? Well, for starters, the military leaders had this almost religious faith in their super detailed war plans. They looked at new tech, like railroads, and figured they could move huge armies faster than ever to land a quick knockout punch. Plus, history seemed to be on their side. The big European wars before this were usually over in just a few months. Their whole game plan was simple: attack, overwhelm them, and be home in time to decorate the tree.
This one phrase, man, it just captures the entire feeling of 1914. This wasn't just some slogan cooked up by the government. This is what mothers and fathers and sweethearts were genuinely saying to each other as they waved goodbye. It was a promise of a short, glorious little adventure.
All right, so with all that optimism in the air, the great powers started to put their grand strategies into motion. And these were these incredibly intricate, almost clockwork-like plans, all designed to get that fast victory everyone was banking on.
Germany's big idea was the famous Schlieffen Plan. The goal was to avoid a war on two fronts. The plan was to swing this massive army through neutral Belgium, kind of like a giant revolving door, to knock out France in 6 weeks. They figured they could do it before the huge, slow Russian army could even get its boots on. France, on the other hand, had Plan 17, which was basically a strategy of pure, aggressive, head-first attack into Germany to take back some lost land. But here's the key thing. Both plans were built for one thing, and one thing only: speed.
But here's the problem. These elegant old-school plans immediately slammed headfirst into the brutal reality of 20th century firepower. They had completely, catastrophically underestimated how powerful new defensive weapons were. The machine gun, for instance, it was a meat grinder. It could just mow down waves of attacking soldiers. So yeah, the German army was moving fast, but it was also bleeding troops and stretching its supply lines so thin they were about to snap. All while a small but really tough British force was slowing them down even more.
And the cost of this collision between old tactics and new tech was just unbelievable. I mean, look at this number. Over 1 million casualties. That's killed, wounded, or missing on all sides. And that's just in the first month of the war. That whole romantic dream was dying in the fields of France, and it was being replaced by an industrial-scale slaughter nobody could have possibly imagined.
Germany's grand plan came so close to working. But right outside of Paris, at the Marne River, that whole illusion of a quick and easy victory finally and completely shattered. By early September, things were looking really bad. German troops were so close to Paris they could actually see the Eiffel Tower. With their armies about to collapse, the French and the British launched this desperate, last-ditch counterattack. And in one of the most legendary moments of the war, the French military commandeered the entire fleet of Paris taxis to rush reserve soldiers to the front line. And unbelievably, it was just enough. The German advance was stopped dead in its tracks. So let's be really clear about this. The Battle of the Marne didn't end the war. Not even close. But what it did end was the idea of a short war. The Schlieffen Plan was officially a failure. Victory wasn't going to be quick, and the boys were definitely not going to be home by Christmas. With the dream of that quick knockout blow totally gone, the entire way the war was fought changed. The war of fast movement was over, and a new, frankly terrible phase was about to kick off. So after the Marne, this really weird thing started to happen, something we now call the race to the sea. Both armies were desperately trying to get around the side of the other one. One army would try to swing around, and the other would rush troops north to block them. Then they tried again, a little further up the map. They did this over and over, scrambling north until they literally ran out of country at the English Channel. With nowhere left to go, they had only one option left: dig in.
And this, right here, created the one thing that defined the Western Front for years: stalemate. A hideous, grinding deadlock. The war of movement was dead. And in its place was this huge static line of trenches that stretched for hundreds of miles, where millions of men would live and fight and die for 4 more years, often for just a few feet of muddy ground.
So, in just a few short months, from that cheerful summer in August to the cold of November 1914, the whole world's understanding of what this war was and what it was going to be was just turned completely upside down. That romantic idea of a quick, glorious war, gone. It was replaced by the grim reality of industrial attrition. This wasn't a war of heroic cavalry charges anymore. It was a war of factories, a war of who could produce more artillery shells, and a grim contest of who could sacrifice more human lives. The great miscalculation of 1914 had created a new kind of hell on Earth.
And all this really leaves us with a critical question for today. The leaders and the people of 1914 were blinded by their own assumptions, and it led to a global catastrophe. It forces us to ask ourselves, how do our own modern beliefs and expectations about conflicts, big and small, shape how they turn out? Are we ever as clear-sighted as we think we are?